Hey guys, it's Kristi. How are you doing? The music is done. I was jamming out, but now I have my mic off, and we are ready to start the show. So hello everyone. Oh, I need to back this mic up a bit, I think. Just a little too close. That might be a little bit better sound-wise. How are you guys doing today? I see people in the chat. I hope everything is going well. Yeah, so hey guys, I don't know if there's anybody, yeah, there's a bit of a wanker in the chat. So whites, unless you're being incredibly ironic, you're on a timeout. Sorry, you're on a timeout. No hate in the comments. Hello everyone, Kristi here. Welcome to a Monday live stream. Hope you are all having a lovely day and doing well. Normally I don't broadcast on a Monday, but this is a holiday in Cologne where I'm at, and there's so much going on. Shitlordery going on. I thought I would do a special shitlord edition of the Sunday live stream on a Monday. So I'm just gonna, I've got my drink here. It's not beer or anything just yet, although it is out of a Weiss beer glass, but it's just in the UK you'd call it like squash. In America it's like a fruit kind of Kool-Aid-y drink, and in Germany I don't even know what it's called. But anyway, yes, we have some exciting shitlordery to get to today. In particular, we're going to be looking at Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, and then we're also going to be talking about Count Dankula. So those are the things that we're going to be covering in this, I think, about an hour-long program. It won't be, I'm not planning on it being a 2-hour live stream. I do those on the Sundays, but I wanted to top up a little bit with some of the other content I didn't get a chance to talk about or was brought to my attention yesterday. I think that it probably makes the most sense to do the Dankula stuff first. And sorry, I'm just going to rearrange my window here a little bit to make sure I can see the chat, because, you know, I try to keep up with you guys and follow what you're doing, and the window is not wanting to resize itself, but at least I can scroll down. All right. Yeah, shall we start with a very quick story, a very rapidly evolving story? Let me go ahead and swap my screen over here. Okay, let's start with Count Dankula, because it's the easier one to cover. It's shorter, and then we can, I don't know, do you want to spend time with Sargon? Well, we have to break down, we can break down the Sargon destiny discussion. I watched 42 minutes of it, and then I had to turn off the Carl destiny thing because it was just so frustrating. But we'll get to that. I'm sure we'll all be that frustrated in a little bit. Not being ironic, yeah, so people in the timeout, there's no tolerance of transphobia in my comments, just so you know, no bigotry. And here, Seb, I'll go ahead and make you a moderator. I know you from Twitter. You seem pretty cool. Don't abuse it. Oh, and 250, I think I've known you long enough now. We've had enough interactions. You're officially a mod too. So I'm going to let you guys kind of take care of the content. And what I prefer is warn people about their behavior with a timeout first. Say what they've done wrong. Give them a timeout. If they continue to be to violate the courtesy and show other people respect, then you can boot them out. That's generally how I advise it. But moderators, I empower you to use your own discretion. So that's what I'm doing here. Right. Bullet mods? I don't know what bullet mods are. Anyway, before doing so I was going to do the Carl show this morning. I got up and I was going to be setting up the title for the Hangout when I saw this covered on Twitter, that there was a plan by BBC Scotland. I guess somebody just thought media attention would be good, that any press is good press, and in order to represent all sides of the debate, hashtag, you know, free speech for far-right bigots, I guess, they invited Count Dankula to be part of a program. So let's just go ahead. You can read this. I've got it linked in the description box below. You can go ahead and look at this article yourself. But I'll read out the first sections just to get you caught up if you haven't had a chance to see it yourself. BBC Scotland's new digital channel is facing a major backlash after recruiting a criminal who taught his dog to perform the Nazi salute. When you put it like that, it seems pretty obvious, don't you think? Like someone went, oh yeah, this would be a perfect idea. Let's get a guy convicted of hate speech, an unrepentant convict on hate speech who is actually refusing to pay his fine, and he won't acknowledge, you know, the damage that the irresponsible way in which he used his platform the last time when he was given one. Anyway, continuing. Mark Meacham will be allowed to air his right-wing views next month on the taxpayer-funded channel, despite his conviction for a grossly offensive hate crime last year. The appointment will outrage members of Scotland's Jewish community who already feel vulnerable to what they perceive as a rise in anti-Semitism in the country. Meacham, 31, caused uproar when he uploaded a video to the website YouTube showing his girlfriend's pug dog during the Sieg Heil salute, along with obscene Nazi imagery. The provocative blogger from Coatbridge in Lancashire also chanted variations of the phrase "gas the Jews," repeating the slur around 23 times in a few minutes. Just this week, Meacham boasted to his social media followers that he was still refusing to pay the $800 fine handed to him by a judge in an Airdrie Sheriff Court. Meacham will star along reality TV personalities in James English and Edinburgh-based dominatrix Megara Fury. Glasgow Friends of Israel's member and Glasgow Friends of Israel member and prominent Scottish lawyer Mark Burlow said he could not believe Meacham, who was accused of making light of the Holocaust, is being given such a public platform. And this is important. There's two people that they quote here. That, yeah, he's only 31. Yeah, I know. It's all that smoking and drinking. It really takes a toll on you. It's very important quotes, which is why I'm continuing. Usually I do maybe the first third or about a third of the article, but there's two important people here to quote. One is Mr. Burlow, and the other one is a representative of the Scottish Conservative Party. He said, "It is absolutely sickening and disgusting. Anti-Semitism is a very difficult subject, but we Jews knows what it looks like and feels like. I know anti-Semitism has become very popular, but I don't think that Meacham's politics can be described as a view. The Holocaust is no laughing matter." There's a difference between making fun of Hitler and making fun of gassing 6 million Jews. Mic drop. Mic drop. I think this is the perfect sentence, and we should quote Mr. Burlow for, every time some Dankula fan comes along and says, "It was just a joke, mate." There's a difference in making fun of Hitler and making fun of gassing 6 million Jews. I just think that's so profound, I'll let it stand. Then the other one, there's a little bit of a talk in the next article that I'll be reading from that follow this. So then, also, I think this is important to communicate. Last night, Scottish Conservative Shadow Culture Secretary Rachel Hamilton said that the cooperation needed to reconsider its decision to give Mark Meacham a slot on national television. She said, quote, "The promotion of this individual in any BBC programme would seem to be entirely against the BBC Charter. If BBC Scotland wants to retain the goodwill of its many audiences, it should really reconsider this decision. It would be astonishing if the BBC in any capacity was to give a platform to someone convicted of a hate crime." And that's a Conservative Party. That's a Scottish Conservative Party. So you see how far right-wing Mark Meacham is, how far right-wing Carl is, and Sargon, and UKIP, and Tommy Robinson. They are far right. Far, far right. If you've got the Scottish Conservatives basically also disavowing this and calling it what it is, a hate crime. A hate crime. A Speech Act hate crime, but a hate crime. This article came out in the Scotsman on Sunday the 3rd, so yesterday, at 9:48 in the morning. Now clearly, it had mentioned last night, so, there had been some reaction on social media. But I was astounded because I got this information this morning, so within 24 hours, and kind of assumed this was the most up-to-date information there was available. And then I saw this, which came out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday. So between 10 in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, the BBC completely changed its position. Right. So let's go ahead and see what this update is that they put out on the Scotsman website within under 5 hours of the initial article being posted. BBC Scotland cancels show with Nazi pug criminal after furious backlash. Now this is interesting. I think this is an interesting examination of how the media frames this issue. Because if you remember, if you look up, Nazi pug criminal is a different, if you just do Nazi pug, I bet. Yeah, man who taught dog Nazi salute found guilty of hate crime, mate your dog's a Nazi. Just trying to look at some of the news coverage here, because oftentimes they don't mention that he's a criminal. They don't mention the hate crime part of it in the sorry, I'm just catching up on some of these stories. So here we go, drop show making Nazi salute video. Nazi pug YouTuber, he's called. The man who taught a pug to do a Nazi salute. The Nazi pug guy. There's a lot of times it's not mentioned that he is a criminal. He's a convicted criminal because of this. So I'm really glad to see the Scotsman put that into the headline. He's a Nazi pug criminal. It's actually a hate crimes, speech crime, criminal. But anyway, excuse me. All right, so let's read on, shall we? So this happened. Someone decided to commission the show. They wanted to get apparently edgy people to bring in the youth. So they picked a far-right convict who is, went to trial because he was promoting genocide on his YouTube channel. And that's who they decided to bring on their show to really tap into that youth vote in Scotland or whatever. I don't know. Hold on one second. Let me just take a sip here. Then that was published, and normal people outside of the YouTube bubble had a perfectly normal reaction, which was to be outraged, disgusted, and dismayed. Mark Meacham, who was convicted of a grossly offensive hate crime last year, was set to co-star in a program on the broadcaster's new digital channel. So BBC Scotland has performed a dramatic U-turn, sorry did I miss this, after facing backlash over their decision to give a TV role to a criminal who taught a dog to perform a Nazi salute. Thank you! Yes! Thank you, Scotsman! Giving a role to a criminal. That is what he is. He's been convicted of a crime. It's not just a soft little joke that doesn't affect far-right, hardcore, sort of like British nationalists who don't really care about anti-Semitism. He's a criminal. Anyway. Campaigners had branded the move to give Meacham a role in the late-night discussion series absolutely sickening. BBC Scotland were quick to change their minds after the original decision to appoint the 31-year-old who uploaded a video to YouTube showing his girlfriend's pug dog doing the Sieg Heil salute alongside obscene Nazi imagery. A BBC Scotland spokesperson said, "We have been reviewing our new late-night discussion programs, The Collective, during the edit process." It's already been filmed. This is also interesting. As with all new formats, robust editorial processes apply. In this case, we have concluded it's not appropriate to include Mark Meacham as a contributor. The two programs in which he featured will not be broadcast as part of any series. So the BBC Scotland are so out of touch, or whoever did this is so inside the YouTube bubble, one of the two happened, that he got, he's a criminal. He got convicted of a hate crime. That's relevant when asking someone to be an expert on a news program. Unless he's an expert in the crimes he's committed, it should be noted that he's been convicted of a hate crime when he gives his views as part of understanding whether or not he's an appropriate person to put on the show. Clearly, because he has been convicted, it's not only that he's been convicted of a hate crime, right? There's a larger story here. The other part of the problem is that he is refusing to acknowledge his culpability and pay his fine. He is actively resisting acknowledging the suffering he caused, the hurt he caused, and taking ownership of it. So had he actually, you know, he was convicted of a crime for a reason. There was sufficient evidence to be found guilty. Given that guilt, if he is unrepentant, why should the BBC platform an unrepentant bigot? It doesn't make sense. It's not part of their public remit to give a platform to people who spread anti-Semitism. So let's continue. So they decided to, and then they decided to cancel his ass. So, yay. Right choice. The article goes on. The blogger of Coatbridge, Lancashire, also chanted variations of the phrase "gas the Jews," repeating the slur 23 times in a few minutes. Meacham has also boasted to his social media followers that he was still refusing to pay his £800 fine and continued to protest his innocence. He was set to star with reality TV personality James English, who admitted assaulting and spitting on a woman in 2015. So, real classy panel there. You got someone who's promoting anti-Semitism and someone who admitted to assaulting and spitting on a woman. Great. And then a dominatrix Megara Fury, who I don't know. BBC Scotland was last month criticised for dumbing down its new Scottish channel in a bid to appeal to younger voters. MSPs have also called on the broadcaster to reconsider airing the programmes, for they fear they may breach the charter. So again, there's a charter that the BBC has to adhere to in order to make sure its content, because it's publicly funded, is also got a public service. Jewish campaigners blasted the corporation for supporting a man convicted of an anti-Semitic hate crime. It's absolutely sick and disgusting, said Matthew Burlow. We've already heard from him in the last article. I know that anti-Semitism, we were just re-recording that. So let's see, it said. The BBC Scotland programme, which will air next month, will see 4 people with strong opinions take on controversial topics in each episode. The regular contributors will lead and present the show and debate among themselves in a living room style setup, according to one source. A tweet this week included that Mark Meacham's social persona, Count Dankula, revealed that he, English, and Fury will co-star in the new programme. So that is what that is all about. Good on, I mean, it was a poor choice to start with. Old BBC, let me swap this over. BBC Scotland, that was just a really, really bad decision all the way around. And I'm glad that people stepped up and spoke out and said, why are you platforming a racist? There's so much in terms of double standards when it comes to the criminality of white men in particular. White men are often given a pass for their criminal behavior. I mean, look at Tommy Robinson. I mean, if anyone from Antifa had the criminal convictions that he does, that would be all you hear about. But people on the right are quite happy to associate with a known criminal, someone who was thrown in prison for fraud and for violence. And now they are also associated with a convicted guy convicted of a hate crime. Not only that, he's completely unrepentant. He's completely unrepentant. And I'm going to repeat what I said yesterday. I watched Kevin's appearance on Dankula's channel, or whichever way around it went. The guy doesn't have any opinions worth hearing. He really doesn't. He's famous because he said anti-Semitic things. That's the only thing that really qualified him for media notoriety. He isn't studied. He isn't learned. He has no personal experience on issues that a competency on any kind of issue. He doesn't understand politics. He doesn't understand political motivations. He's literally just famous for being a racist. That's it. And why should we be platforming somebody who is really their only, the only thing that they're known for is being convicted of speech that was a hate crime? It's a waste of taxpayer money. So I'm glad, I can't even believe it was filmed, to be honest. And I'm sure Meacham got paid for his time. He'll still get that money. What the hell is BBC Scotland doing handing money out to people who've been convicted of hate crimes? Again, this is not a free speech issue. It's about the kinds of people that you put on with public money. They should have some kind of something intelligent to say to the British people. And Count Dankula, literally, there's nothing he can offer or say that would be unique, other than his experiences of being convicted of a hate crime. Sorry, I'm dusting, because my keyboard is a little dusty. Cleaning while I broadcast. Multitasking. Alright, so what are people in the comments saying about the Mark Meacham thing? Let's see. I'm gonna go back a little bit. So he's a criminal, says one Julio. I got a caution for possessing weed. Oh, that was my point. Yeah, it's not that he's just a criminal. It's a criminal that's being platformed on a television show who has no background or knowledge. He doesn't have a degree in politics. He doesn't have any kind of like 30 years of experience of activism. He's literally just a racist dude who made a video and put it up on YouTube. So yeah, that's why. We shouldn't give a platform to bigots. Yeah, certainly not in terms of the BBC. The BBC has got a public service remit. And I can understand why people in the Jewish community, and I would stand by people in the Jewish community, so this is a misappropriation of resources. If he thinks that's comedy, then it's also a crime against the art of comedy. Yeah, it's not as if Count Dankula, he wasn't trying to be funny. I mean, I guess he thinks he was trying to be funny, but all he did was say something really offensive. At the end of the day, that's not a joke. Being offensive is being a bigot or racist or anti-Semitic with a pug dog as a prop is not comedy. It's just a way to smuggle calls for genocide, to normalize that kind of behavior under the veneer of comedy. Who was the victim, though? Well, in this case, it's about creating a hostile public environment or giving, normalizing, saying those kinds of things when so normalizing calling for the genocide of people by just laughing it off as a joke. It's not a joke to the people who are targeted by calls for genocide. I think you need to kind of people need to step out of their like dominant majority person and think about what it's like to be on the other side. There's too much emphasis put on by people who are free speech absolutists on the person speaking and not on the consequences of the audience. And people who engage in like free speech debates need to think about free speech as consequences and the audience. Because if you always privilege the speaker, you are then creating an unequal scenario. And because the point of, I think a lot of right-wingers, they think everyone should have equality. If you privilege hate speech over the consequences of that hate speech, then you're not actually protecting you're not providing an individual with an environment in which they can succeed. So you can't have both of those without some kind of discussion as to how they interact. Hate speech makes minorities feel unsafe, and it often radicalizes people. Yes, or correct. It makes minorities, people who are targeted, and also other people feel unsafe if they see that kind of bigotry. And even if it doesn't, say, radicalize people, it desensitizes people. If they hear it over and over again, they don't they just tune off, they don't feel the empathetic connection with the people who are targeted by that. And you normalize calling for the extermination of a group. That is not, that's not just a joke, that has serious consequences. I'm going through here. Kind of offensive to people in BDSM to imply dominatrix is on par with people accused of hate crimes. Well, I don't think that in the article they were saying the dominatrix was implicated. It's just that she was added, I assume it's she by the name, but added as a list of people who were also brought on there. And the other guy was admitted spitting on and assaulting a woman. So I don't think that being listed, she was on the program with those people, so it's not unfair to list her. So I don't know that that's a real valid critique. Before, after your alien, let's just look to see what people are saying. Dankula's a nobody. Yeah. The right-wing defense of George Pallett in Australia proves, I don't know anything about stuff going on in Australia, sorry. Hostile environments increase the chances of victimhood. Yes, it's really that simple. And Nick Griffin's appeared on Question Time, finished him in the BNP as a political force, so sometimes good comes from these situations. Yes, but of course it was on Question Time, wasn't it? And on Question Time, there were people on the panel who could hold him to a standard, an intellectual integrity standard on that panel. A living room conversation where people are just talking shit is a great way to get out unresearched, uneducated, bigoted points of view and not have people in place who are equipped to refute that accurately. That's the difference between going on Question Time and going on a casual program where a lot of stuff would be let slide. Right? What possible good could be given platforms? Okay, are people having a debate in the chat? Kristi is awesome in this. That is all. Thank you. All right, so you guys are going to continue on having this debate in the chat. That's good. Happy to see that going on. And while that happens, let's go on to the next point. So yes, we've been going for 25 minutes. That seems to be on pace to get us out of here in 1 hour now. All right, so anyway, closing up, Mark Meacham off of BBC Scotland. Boy, bye. So glad to see you gone. It's too bad you probably already got paid and you'll be able to cash that check, because as an unrepentant convict of a hate crime, I think that people should know that, and that should be taken into account whenever, you know, you are offered a job. Because social pressures are there to help us have a society that is inclusive to people. And if people want to create a society where making jokes about killing people is normalized, then yeah, if people don't want to associate with you, that's not our fault, that's your fault for being an unrepentant convict of a hate crime who's never acknowledged the wrongdoing you've done or apologized for it. So from one completely inadequately trained person to speak on politics, let's go to a person who is completely inadequately prepared to talk about trans issues and yet wants to make ridiculous assertions. This was so painful, you guys. This was so painful. As I might have said, I watched about 41, 42 minutes of it before I had to turn it off. And the reason why it was so difficult to listen to is Carl just keeps freaking talking. He just blah, 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 blah. And he doesn't, if he would just shut up, Carl, for 5 minutes. For 5 minutes. And instead of preparing the defense of your bullshit, just try to process what Destiny is saying. And that was the most frustrating thing about this, is that Carl doesn't actually understand. Carl's understanding of this topic compared to Destiny's. This is like somebody with a graduate degree or, you know, like a university degree trying to explain to an 8-year-old why he's wrong. And Carl just refuses. He just isn't, he's mentally ill-equipped. He's mentally unprepared to deal with the concepts. He thinks he is, because he thinks he understands philosophy, but he's not understood philosophy. He thinks he understands what social constructs are, but he doesn't understand the epistemology. He thinks that biological essentialism isn't a logical fallacy. And it's just, it was so frustrating listening to somebody who has good and smart things to say being ignored by somebody who is so ill-educated and so in desperate need of remedial training, yet just entirely impervious to any attempts to explain to him why he's wrong. Yeah, Carl just doesn't understand works as a complete sentence. That's very good. And I was not sure if this is really great for reviewing, mostly because Carl just freaking talks non-stop over and over and over again over everything. But I think it's important. I'm going to try to break down a little bit of it. I know I haven't watched the whole thing, so I will say I've heard from people on Twitter that Destiny says something pretty questionable at some point in this. By 42 minutes, either I missed it or it hasn't come up yet, so I can't like vouch for the whole stream. But just generally, you know, Destiny does, I think, you know, as good a job as one can do, considering that Carl is immune to learning and he doesn't seem to have a capacity to process information on the fly and really take it in. So Carl's too mentally hunkered down in his ignorance, and that when he tries to explain his ignorance, all he ends up doing is showing that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Anyway, let's go ahead and we'll watch part of this. So, and this is on, yeah, Destiny's channel, so I don't think he'll do a copyright strike and then free use and everything. We're mostly just going to say that, besides, we're mostly just going to agree with Destiny anyway. The conversation, for at least most of the 40 minutes of it, is all about trans issues, and I will, if you haven't seen it yet, let me just prepare you with a few concepts. Biological essentialism, and maybe it's even sort of worth looking up what this is, because Carl's, I can see I already looked it up yesterday to make sure. Okay. Just wait while, oh, how about I actually transition the screen? That's very helpful, isn't it? I'll show you guys what I'm looking at. Such a pro. This is from the Oxford Reference, and it's a quick reference definition of biological essentialism. The belief that human nature, an individual's personality, or some specific quality, such as intelligence, creativity, homosexuality, masculinity, femininity, or a male's propensity to aggression, is an innate and natural essence, rather than a product of circumstances, upbringing, and culture. The concept is typically invoked when there is a focus on difference, whereas females are seen as essentially different from males. See gender essentialism? The term has often been used pejoratively by constructionists. It is often used synonymously with biological determinism. So, I wonder if they have a link to gender essentialism. No, they don't. But gender essentialism is basically just biological essentialism, but specifying gender relations. Alright, so here we've got this wiki. Actually here we'll go. So something in 2018. Because it's true. Gender essentialism is the widely discredited and outdated idea that men and women act differently and have different options in life because of intrinsic or essential differences between the sexes. In other words, it is the idea that men and women are fundamentally different for reasons that are unchangeable. Gender essentialism is often used to excuse gender-based biases in society. For instance, it can be used to justify the idea that jobs traditionally held by women are accorded less respect and lower pay. Gender essentialism is both informed by gender stereotypes and reinforces them. This can have numerous effects on society. And then there's a discussion here about gender essentialism and homophobia, non-binary genders, how it imperils consent, and also how to refute it. So let's have a little bit of a look at refuting gender essentialism in preparation for our discussion, listening to discussions between Carl and Destiny. People who argue against gender essentialism do not attempt to claim that male and female bodies are the same. Instead, they posit that there is no reason that the biological differences between the sexes should lead to specific expectations for male and female behavior. They believe that there is no reason such differences should encourage inequalities in opportunity. In the sexual realm, the argument might be that some people may tend to be more active and others more passive in the bedroom. However, those differences would be expected to have to do more with the personality and other factors than gender. In fact, while there is often one member of a couple who is more interested in sex, that person can be of any gender. Arguments against gender essentialism are supported by evidence and that gender expectations differ significantly across cultures. They are also supported by very different sexual and gender norms that have existed in different times and different eras. Such differences are apparent with respect to not only sexual behavior, but a variety of other aspects of life. So this is an important point. If gender essentialism were true, and there is some inherent essence, intrinsic, unchangeable factor that is uniquely female and uniquely male, then we would be able to see that unique and intrinsic and essence being manifest consistently across all cultures, all locations, and throughout all time. But that's not what we see. We don't see an essence. What we see are socially constructed norms that reflect that society, and they aren't all structured in the same way. So on its face, gender essentialism, doesn't have a lot of data. It might seem intuitive, and this is Carl's problem too. It just seems logical. Well, sometimes you have to go beyond a simplistic evaluation and think harder about things. But we all know two things. One, Carl doesn't understand what words mean, and he isn't interested in learning what they mean. And two, he's not a thinker. He's not someone who actually makes an effort to go into philosophy and understand the ephemeral basis upon which we map language onto our world. And I'll come on to that in a bit. So anyway, those 2 points, a couple points I wanted to make. And now let's go ahead and watch not all, but part of Sargon's appearance on Destiny's channel, or vice versa, whatever it is. Prepare for Sargonian idiocy, warning, dumbness ahead. Oh, and we're not getting any sound. So let's see, make sure we can fix that. Ah, it's because I've got it running through the wrong audio. Okay, this should be a little bit better now.
I'm gonna regret this.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, buddy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
How's it going?
Now, I just want to say that I can't do anything about the leveling. Actually, maybe I can. Let me see if I can put a filter, a better filter on that, because Carl is much louder than Destiny. So I'm going to whack that up to about 20, and it might actually solve the problem. So fingers crossed, Carl won't constantly be louder than Destiny. That would be good. All right, let's see what happens.
Yeah, pretty good. How about you?
Well, it's going a lot better, but now I'm talking to you, so here we go.
Okay, well, I'm gonna
just true. It's like I was having a good day, and now I gotta deal with you. I have a lot of empathy for that reaction. Just, it might not have been polite, but it was honest. I can relate.
record this on my end, okay? As well, okay?
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Great.
Okay. All right. What are we doing? What are we doing today, Sargon?
I heard that you wanted to talk about transgenderism.
Okay, yeah. Let's start with that one. Why not?
All right, so just, I don't know how it's coming through for you guys in my audio. It's coming through as well, Destiny's a little less quiet than Carl, but it's still pretty quiet. So I'll try increasing this a little bit more, but maybe in the rebroadcast it sounds a little bit better. I hope. So let's see. I'm just gonna whack it up a little bit more, and then I'll leave it be.
Okay.
Okay. What do you got?
I don't know. What's your opinion on it?
And this is, you know, like Carl just also, he never wants to be the one who puts his own position out there to defend first. He's very passive. He's very weak in that way. He doesn't come up with like a strong declarative thing that he's like, here, this is what I think and I want to defend. He's always like, oh, what do you think? Let me pick apart your stuff. What do you think? And oh, memento mori. Kristi, I love it when you mine for morons. It feels like that's what we're doing today. Digging. All right. So just notice this about his tactics, that he's actually not a very strong debater. He's very weak and very passive, and he's always looking to be reactive rather than having a bold position. He doesn't bring forth robust arguments. He brings forth his fifis and his ignorance.
I mean, I think it's a thing, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your? Weren't you making some? Didn't you say you didn't believe it was real or something? I feel like I saw some tweets from you.
No, you didn't.
And so again, this is also, Carl doesn't understand his own position on things sometimes. He, yeah, I can stand to listen to this for hours. I know. I made it 40 minutes, Scorpion. But, so he says, no, I never denied the validity of trans people, and yet he's going to get caught on denying the validity of trans people in just a few seconds, because Destiny brings receipts, and Carl brings up making things up in the moment.
Oh man, are you gonna make me? How about you just tell me your stance on it rather than trying to Right, I'm not trying to get you or whatever. I'm curious. What do you think?
Well, you were just trying to put your ideal opinion in my head, weren't you? I don't.
No, he's basically just remembering the bullshit that you do, Carl. And this is
We know, to be honest, it's a really complicated topic, and it's got massive implications.
Gotcha.
So,
Real quick, just to be clear, so the tweet that I saw from your account was if trans women were actually women, you wouldn't need to distinguish them with the term trans. So that was the quote that I was thinking of. Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah. So okay. So.
Yeah. So what you just did, Carl, is you negated the validity of trans people. Can I just point out, like, straight women also is a descriptor, cis women is a descriptor, lesbian women, pansexual women. You can put anything before women. It doesn't negate the category of women that you're describing. You know, Carl, again, he thinks he's making a profound point. Oh, why do you have to call, if trans women are women, why do you have to mention that they're trans women? Well, why do we sometimes differentiate between black women and white women? Does that mean that they're not women because we have to, we show a subcategory of woman? Moron.
Are you of the opinion that, you know, the...
I just love, by the way, Destiny's response, which is entirely appropriate. If you were listening to this on a podcast, you couldn't catch his actual response. And he's just like, wow, yeah, I've already won. Destiny's like, I've already won. Carl, don't you negate the existence of trans people. No, you put that in my mind. But didn't you say this thing, negating the existence of trans women? Yes, I did. Such a moron.
The thing they say, trans women are women.
Yeah.
How do you interpret that?
My interpretation of it is that trans people want to be seen as whatever gender they choose to express themselves with. And so they would want the same treatments in society generally as anybody that would identify as said gender. So rather than being seen as like a trans woman, which implies that you are less than or different than a woman, they would want to be seen as an actual woman, right?
And do you think that there are any issues with that? Do you think that's something that's likely to happen?
And again, the questions he asks are even dumb. I mean, so if Carl's objection is to the language itself, thinking, is something like that going to happen? He's just trying to draw out Destiny to attack him, rather than actually clarifying what his objection is to that statement. He's such a weasel. And he hides behind, this is another thing too, I think it's important about Carl's psychology. He knows he doesn't know anything. And it's much easier, psychologically, if you look at, I think it's called like the game show host effect or something. There is a perception in psychology that the person who asks the questions, even if it's ridiculous, like even if the person asking the question doesn't know the answers, they come across as more intelligent than the person who is trying to answer. What is it? Is it the game show host effect? I'll look that up. The game show host problem? No, that's the Monty Hall problem. But anyway, I'll have to find it out. I remember it, I think it is from Paul Bloom's psychology lecture that's available through the Yale website. They have it on iTunes and they have it on YouTube. You can watch basically all his entire, well, at least you could, his entire psychology course online. But he talks about a lot about cognitive biases, the way that we have different kinds of biases. And one of the biases was, you put two people up and one person is asking the question, the other one is answering it and getting things right and wrong. People watching will consider the person asking the questions to be more intelligent, even if they never have to give an answer to show they're right or wrong. And what they did was they kind of like swapped this with, they asked two people and asked people to measure how intelligent they were. And I think this is why, another reason why Carl wants to take up the position of breaking down other people's arguments. He doesn't have good arguments. He isn't well read. He doesn't understand the philosophy. He doesn't understand the science. So if he actually has to present stuff and make a case on his own, that is very transparent. But if, like a creationist, he spends all his time attacking the evidence presented, or attacking the person presenting it, or attacking the people who think those things, then he's excused from having to demonstrate the validity of his own ideas. And when he's on a show like this with Destiny, where Destiny does try to pull him out and say, look, you just made a whole bunch of claims, let's go through this slowly, Carl will continue to spew bullshit, because it's only by pouring out more obfuscatory bullshit that he can cover up the fact that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Sorry, I'm going on a bit of a rant, but I think it's really important to notice that this pattern of his attacking other people is a demonstration of his lack of knowledge. It's not because he's smart.
Likely, I'm not sure. I would say probably. In terms of possibly, or like morally, should it happen? I mean, probably. I mean, I'm a big fan of liberalism. I think we should support people's individual rights, and if that's what people want, I don't really see any harm in it. So yeah, sure. Yeah.
Another thing that that Destiny kind of points to, but I don't Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could pick on Carl here. But if both of them are sort of more libertarian and believe in individual rights and individual opportunity, one thing that Carl continually ignores is the idea that a trans person, like any other person who's a member of a protected class, in order for them to be fully realized, have those opportunities that he supports as a libertarian and individual rights, you need to have that person operate outside of a system of oppression. You can't say that you are for giving people the opportunity to make themselves great and do things in a society to improve the society by fulfilling themselves, but also say it's okay for society to systematically restrict you and discriminate against you. You can't have opportunity and a bigoted society structure holding you down at the same time. And this is another cognitive dissonance, that Carl wants to tolerate certain types of bigotry while also promoting a society that allows all opportunity, full opportunities ranging from whatever, in all parts of life to people regardless of their areas of intersection or their identities.
Yeah, but the thing about that is also you're putting the decision-making power into the hands of society, and society has requirements that aren't served by the term trans women or women.
Just to point out, there's not an inherent responsibility of language to serve certain people's interests in society. I know that some people would like to transform language and use that power to silence others and force upon them their version of what society should be like. But language doesn't function in that sort of necessary way that Carl keeps trying to make it somehow like there's something beyond us that's forcing us to map woman onto reproduction, and that's just a lie. Anyway.
So this is kind of odd because I think that pretty much everything is put in terms of like every decision is made by society. I don't know who else would make the decisions.
The state.
Oh.
The state is made up of members of society and is part of society. Carl wants to put this sort of really false, there's society and there's people and then there's the state. The state is made up of the people. So the state is part of society, and of course he's anti-government because because he wants to overthrow democracy in order to preserve white male status quo power, and we already know that that's what he would pick. So
okay, so when you say society, you're saying like non-legally, I guess, right, or not enforceable via state powers.
Absolutely. Independent communities of self-association.
Okay.
The state's a unique legal entity of compulsion.
Okay. So, like, what in particular are we talking about here? Like,
I think breeding is really what we're talking about. I think fundamentally, when you say trans women are women, at the end of the day, there's always going to be the necessary component that is childbirth and reproduction, which is one of the. Oh, okay, hang on. Let's just before we jump in, sort of thing.
Sure.
And so I think that is fundamentally one of probably the main reason ultimately that anyone ever forms long-term relationships, at least in the overwhelming majority of cases. I think the expectation to breed is there.
Sure.
Again, I can't tell if he's talking out of his mouth or his ass. I'm sure his ass is so well adapted to putting out shit that it could speak multiple languages at this point. But this reduction of women's entire purpose in Carl's mind, and he will not deviate from this position throughout the conversation. Women are here for breeding, not even having babies, not even creating a family. He thinks of us as like brood mares. Women are to be bred. You put your penis in them, and you put babies in them, and then you give all the responsibilities and the bodily, demands on the women. You just shove all that off on them. And that's what women are for. And as Bruce is very rightly pointing out Simone says, so infertile women aren't women? Yeah. So only fertile women between 16 and 40 are women, says Bruce. Yeah, if you follow Carl's logic throughout this conversation, that is exactly the conclusion you would reach. Postmenopausal women, infertile women, obviously he'd probably say girls could be considered women because they have the possibility of being bred. you know, you don't know until a girl is sexually mature whether or not she is infertile or can have children or has any problems. So those could probably still fall into the category that Carl has created because they have the potentiality to be bred by men. But the breeding part is pretty off. Yeah, I mean, it really shows, it reflects the utility that women serve in his life. Women are there for breeding. That's their purpose to men, is that they are there to receive the semen and to carry the babies. That's what he thinks is the essence, the most important thing about women or females and whatever else.
But so, like, have you had this conversation with other people before?
Because he sounds like an idiot.
There's
lots
no
of
way
people,
you're
lots
not...
of times. Right?
Okay, because you can't defend this argument. It's horrible.
Yeah, exactly. And Carl lives in his little bubble where everyone just agrees with him, and he can't intellectually process why reducing women and men, but he really only ever reduces women to their reproduction, is a fallacy. So I see Katie, is it Carnohan? Did I get that right? Thanks for the super chat. The biggest problem with Carl is that he makes bad statements based on his garbage prejudgments and spends eternity trying to justify them. Yes, Katie. Hashtag nailed it. Hashtag facts. Hashtag speaking the truth. Hashtag spilling tea. Yeah, can I just repeat that? The biggest problem with Carl, because it's so perfect, he makes bad statements based on his garbage prejudgments and spends eternity trying to justify them. That is so well put. Thank you, Katie. Eloquent, concise, precise, and yes, perfect. And Destiny's right. This point is garbage. And if Carl actually ever took up a robust debate and had the courage to leave his echo chamber, as he's not even really leaving his echo chamber here because he's not interested in thinking. He just wants to spew. He's right. It's a terrible argument. And the fact that he can't see that, I think Destiny already knows he's going to win this interaction.
What would you say to a woman that has her tubes tied, that's not capable of having children? It's just no longer a woman? Or what about a man that's had a vasectomy? Is he no longer
I didn't say they were no longer a woman, but they no longer fulfill the sort of necessary biological imperative that the gender role of woman is designed to operate around.
Okay.
So just break this down, right? It's not... This is a very key statement. Oh, hey, PZ. Good to see ya. He does need to shut up and learn. Yeah, Carl, shut up. I did already watch this, by the way, Jordan. All right. So Carl starts like this. He's taking women, breeding with women, and deciding on his own subjective judgment that is their most important function. And then he proceeds... Because I think that's their most important function, this reproductive function should be the limits or the defining characteristics of what the word woman applies to. But this has no basis in reality. This is just his subjective opinion. Because in terms of the word woman, there's nothing in the word woman that requires fertility. It's a category of, like a social category of members of our society, in terms of the sexes. But as you all have pointed out, postmenopausal women are women, infertile women are women, fertile women are women, trans women are women, straight women are women, cis women, lesbian women, these are categories of women. And his fixation on biology just shows that he doesn't actually understand the social construct of words.
Okay.
Oh yeah, good idea. I'll mod PC.
So first of all, designed implies an argument from nature, which is we're not even going to go to there. But when you say
no, okay, stop, because that's exactly the first place we need to go. Because I do think that the gender role, the social gender role of woman, has a natural origin, and I think that it's designed to fulfill a natural function.
Because Carl thinks women breed, and that's the most important thing Carl thinks women do, Carl thinks the word woman should reflect his prioritization of women breeding, being bred, and impose that on the world. I'm just translating for you. That's what he just said. Because he sees something in nature, and he's decided that's the most important quality. He's decided the word woman, not only female biologically, but also the associated word, or linked word woman, is inherent in the definition, and so it's nonsense.
Okay, so are you going to take on a morally prescriptive position based on nature? Are you going to tell me that because certain things are designed in some biological way, we have some sort of like an ought statement that we ought to pursue something because it's like in some ways found in nature? That's like a really weird position to take.
It really depends what it is you're talking about. But like, I don't think that gender roles are transcendental. So
I'm going to be honest.
Okay,
I'm not quite sure what. So I'm going to look up transcendental, just to make sure I'm using common, because yeah, I don't I don't know if he means transcendental or transcend. Let's see. Transcending experience but not human knowledge. Does he mean transcendent? Beyond comprehension, universally applicable. I don't know what he means by transcendental, and that cat is still really cute. All right, I'm not going to try to figure out what Carl thinks. If he can't describe it, I'm not going to waste my time trying to think of it. But that is a weird. I'm not quite sure why he's using that word in that sentence in that way.
I mean, if you want to go down the naturalistic arguments, I mean, we can do that. We're in a really weird area because we're going to have to start deciding, like, well, what falls under that and what doesn't, which implies we don't actually care about nature at all. We're appealing to some higher power.
No.
Yeah. Well,
I don't agree. I think the thing that we're appealing to is the natural biological state of humanity,
which is the is-ought fallacy. Right. So Carl is saying, and this is stuff brought up in the Enlightenment. This is Hume. Is-ought distinction. Right? Should we look that up really quick? Because it's maybe just easier for me to art. The is-ought fallacy. The is-ought fallacy occurs when the assumption is made that because things are a certain way, they should be that way. It can also consist of the assumption that because something is not now occurring, that means it should not occur. In effect, this fallacy asserts that the status quo should be maintained simply for its own sake. It seems to make a value or a fact to derive a moral imperative from the description of a state of affairs. For an example, we do not currently regulate the amount of nicotine in individual cigarettes. Therefore, we need not do this. If nature does not make it, we shouldn't have it. We've always had bonfire, so we always should. The Electoral College is specified in the Constitution, so we can't do away with it. Of course homosexuality is immoral. You don't see any animals doing that. Well, actually, that's empirically also untrue, as well as being a is-ought fallacy. It's totally natural to have many sexual partners. Go with it. All right, so you guys get the idea. And that's pretty much what Carl is appealing to here. He's engaging entirely in, it is the case that women can reproduce, or women in the human species are the ones who reproduce. Therefore, we ought to limit our category of women to only those who can reproduce, who can bear children. And it's a terrible argument.
The natural biological state of humanity is not two men having a conversation on Discord, though. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, our natural state is like hunter-gatherer.
We're not trying to reproduce.
Not everybody is constantly trying to reproduce in their lives.
I didn't say they were.
Then why are we talking about reproduction when we're talking about trans
Because
women?
for the majority of people, they will want to.
All right. Can I also just... on this issue that people have urges, yes, as self-conscious, self-aware beings, we definitely understand that sex leads to children. We've understood that cause and effect chain very well. And I also think that there are some people who also really long for their own children. That is probably a perfectly biologically, natural kind of thing that might occur with quite a lot of people. But the fact is that our sexual urges, he wants to conflate sexual urges with reproduction. And the fact is that when a man, let's say, let's do it in this way, a man sees a really attractive woman, is his reaction, ooh, I want to have babies with her. Like, I want to see what our babies look like. No, they want to get off. Like, sexual gratification is the urge that nature gives us. And that urge that, you know, animals don't necessarily, I think, know the cause and effect either. That urge then leads to, or can sometimes produce, offspring. But Carl again wants to conflate this and say, well, women exist to be bred, and we have sexual urges to reproduce. He's missing a step there in terms of that important two-step process. You first have we have sexual urges, and that is what is being fulfilled when we engage in sexual activity. And a consequence of that can be pregnancy, intended or unintended. But I think that I wanted to point out that Carl's making another false assumption when he skips over the fact that our sexual urges are for sexual gratification and release. And they're not always a conscious effort to breed. I would just point to the way that men talk about women. When they're admiring them, they're not saying, we would make the most beautiful babies. Or I want to wake up next to you while you know, she's breastfeeding our children. That's not right. Just pointing that out.
Even if I'm not even sure if that's true, but even if that is true,
that's of course true.
The
population would tank in one generation if that wasn't true.
The population is already tanking across every single Western country
it's
almost.
Shrinking by a small degree every.
And also, you know, there's a couple wrong things here. What we find is that when you give women education and access to birth control, the immediate consequence is that they start to control the spacing and timing of their families. And they're reducing the size of those families. So, you know, if the purpose is breeding, then women would just want all the babies they could possibly have. If it's intrinsic to what we want, we wouldn't just have 2 or 3 kids and then stop, right? And this just shows that it's a conscious choice. It's not some sort of blind biological drive that overrides all other points of our life. And the other thing to recognize, and this isn't mentioned because there's a lot of focus on the West, but the number of members of family, the number of family members in every country, developed or developing, has been going down worldwide. You just don't have places where it's common to have 16 kids anymore. And it's a natural product of modernity. And quite frankly, we need people to have fewer kids because we're over-consuming and we're working our planet the way it is anyway. So why we would have societies that are constructed around producing more of the problem of overpopulation rather than encouraging people to adopt, or, you know, not shaming people who don't want kids or anything like that. It just seems to me that it's just a poor argument all the way around. All right, I'm gonna shut up now and let it go. There we go.
Yeah, but it's shrinking, contracting because not everybody wants to reproduce, because women are having less children.
Yeah, but that's a tiny number of each generation that reproduces. That
a tiny number. Carl pulling numbers out of his ass again. He has no idea what percentage of women are planned to not have kids ever. And someone else mentioned that they don't want kids. Honestly, I never wanted kids, which is why I never had them, because I think people who are parents should be the people who want the kids. But I'm perfectly happy not having children. That was my choice. That's actually, my life turned out exactly the way I wanted. Yet Carl can't fathom that a woman wouldn't want a baby. Why? Because that's how he defines women. Women have babies. And so if you don't want to have a baby, then you can't be a woman. That's how his logic goes, I think. That's what it sounds like to me.
It's less than 2.0. I mean, like, women, we're not having children at a replacement rate anymore. I don't know what tiny, all of these words are like really weird. Like, what do you mean by tiny number? We're not replacing our population right now. Like, all of the populations of the Western world.
Okay, calm down, right? Yeah. The replacement rate in my country is 1.9, but that means that a very small number of women are not reproducing in comparison to the number of women who are reproducing.
He doesn't understand numbers. He doesn't understand math. Okay. It's not. So if you listen to Carl, and this is what I think he's saying, so you guys in the chat can correct me if you heard something else. But what he's saying is that there's a bunch of women who are having like 6 or 7 babies, and then a small number of women who are having no babies. And because of that, the small number of women having no babies is bringing down the average to like 1.9. No, right? Family sizes are going down, just in general. You know, if you look from 25 years ago, 100 years ago, it's getting down to, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 kids. All women in families are doing this. And yeah, sometimes you see a family with like 6 kids and you see a family with 0 kids. But you can't blame the declining replacement rate for an internal domestic population because a couple women aren't having babies. There's a wider societal trend. And honestly, I think the wider societal trend is necessary if we are going to stay a species on this planet that isn't just ravaged by massive climate change. We need to stop reproducing at exponential rates. And the easiest way to do that is through contraception. That's the easiest way to do it. So again, he's just wrong. He doesn't understand how statistics work.
Millions and millions and millions of women who've reproduced.
Okay, sure.
And it's a downward trend.
Okay, so let's say that the majority of people want to reproduce. How is it even relevant to this conversation?
Because we're talking about a social role. And the purpose of the social role of woman is to facilitate the ability to form a breeding pair with a man.
That's our purpose, ladies. Our role in society, it's not our brains. It's not our empathy or compassion. It's not our art. It's not our creativity. It's not anything outside of our uterus. Our social function, according to Carl, can be reduced to our ovaries and our uterus. If they just put us into a big barn, you know, in pods, and they sort of just, you know, we were all unconscious and just being bred like a breeding machine, that would be no different from what women's role in society is now, if you listen to Carl. Because it's all reduced to being a baby machine. Being a woman to him means being a baby machine. That's what he's trying to defend.
Because they're the two aspects of humanity that both need to be fertile in order to conceive and produce a child.
Can I just point out the look of pain on Destiny's face here? Look at there he is. There. Look at that. It's like that thing here. These 2 lines, like that. That is, you're saying something so profoundly stupid. I can't either understand what you're saying or I can't believe that you're actually saying it. I know that look. I know that look because that's the look I make when I listen to Carl.
This is what I mean when I say you can't separate the gender role from the gender role of woman from the biological essence of what it is to be a female.
Just again, I've explained before. I'm just reinforcing the stupidity, just pulling it out, pausing it, because he is just making fundamental logical fallacies and poor conclusions over and over.
The one was created by the other, but the formulation "trans women are women" suggests that the gender role of woman has created the biological reality of being female, which is not.
This is just a word salad. That is just a word salad. Like the social category, the linguistic category of woman refers, to my mind, anyone who is, identifies as a woman and lives in that way. Like I don't see why the expansion of the category to include trans women does anything to the word woman. But of course, for Carl, it's very, very important to be a gatekeeper on these kinds of things, because if you expand the word woman to include trans women, that is an upending of the status quo. It's progress in society. It's creating more inclusion. And so in order to justify his discrimination, in order to justify legalizing bigotry against trans people, he is going to reduce the word woman to a particular reproductive function that some women have or might use. And it's just so offensive.
Not correct, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's just walk down the road. So do you think that, let's say that women en masse said that they wanted to pursue like higher education and work opportunities more than they wanted to pursue having children. Do you think that they should have the right to do that, or should we culturally or via the state or whatever force them, compel them to have more children instead? Because that would be like...
I don't think that's got anything to do with the transgender debate.
But it does have to do with the way the word woman is used in society and what the value, not the value, what's the word? What are the boundaries that Carl wants to impose on women to qualify? I think this is it. Carl's putting out a metric by which women have to qualify to be called a woman. And he doesn't get to make that decision. And even if he wanted to make an argument that that should be the way society operates, he's using logical fallacies and he's talking shit, so he's not at all credible or convincing in making this assertion. He's not at all making a good case for why we should police who gets to be called a woman in this way.
Okay, well, because you're speaking in terms of like biological prescriptivism right now. You're telling me that like the role of woman should be to have a child or for like childbirth.
I didn't say it should be anything. Society at large will decide in a very sort of holistic way what the role of woman should be.
No. Like society, I guess there's a couple different ways you can take that phrase. But it's not when you talk about society deciding what the roles for women should be, this somehow implies like, you know, men have a stake in defining what the role of women should be, or, you know, this is not how language is used or contested. It's not like society says, okay, we've had a meeting, we've gathered, and the leaders of the society, here are the minutes for it, and we have decided these are the people who can be called a woman. It's an organic process. There are, like, I include trans women in my category of women in my head when I think about different categories of women. I didn't need society to decide that for me. So again, Carl's just got really weird ideas about how things work.
But I think that there's no getting around the fact that it was something created by society to account for the observable biological differences between men and women, and the biological reality that women have an imperative to breed and the mechanism by which to do so.
All right, so here what he's saying is, at some point in the past, men decided, he didn't say that, but that's what he's saying, you know, that's been society pre-feminism, first wave feminism is definitely just men making decisions. That there's a whole logic here, or not logic, there's a whole series of events. So at a point in time in the past, men decided, without evidence he's claiming this, that the word woman is fundamentally necessarily linked to breeding and the breeding of women. And therefore, if we try to apply the word, this is the logic or the consequence, if we try to apply the word woman to any unit of a human category that can't be impregnated or deliver a baby, then that is an invalid use of the term. And we just know from our own experience that's not at all how the word woman has been used, or even, you know, historically. That's just completely inaccurate.
What do you mean by
by imperative? Social mechanism needs to be created to justify that and to facilitate that.
Sure. Okay. So I'm not trying to misquote. I'm just trying to understand, because a lot of the words you're using are really loaded. When you say women have an imperative to breed, what do you mean by that?
Human beings have a biological imperative to reproduce.
What do you mean by imperative? Like, are you saying that this is like just descriptively something we do, or are you saying that it's something that we should push towards?
It's something that they feel that they want to do.
Okay. So what does that have to do?
Carl is an expert on what fertile women, which is the only category of person he considers a woman, wants and feels, because he's such an expert on this.
If some people feel like they need to reproduce, which is fine, I'm okay with that, what does that have to do with the discussion about trans people?
Because we need a way of being able to actually do that.
But we still can do that. You can go and have a child with a woman that is capable of having a child.
Yeah, but you need to know what a woman is.
No, you don't. You need to know if they're you do. You're laughing, but you realize that there are women that you would call real women that can't have children, right? Do you acknowledge that?
I know.
Okay, so
yes,
knowing whether or not somebody is a woman under whatever arbitrary Sargon definition of woman there is, knowing that somebody
it's not my definition.
Well, it is your
very much his definition.
Trust me.
Well, adult human female, it's just the dictionary.
He's trying now to slide adult human female when he spent the whole time linking it to breeding. This is what a lying sack of shit he is.
Definition. It's
no.
The common definition society at large uses.
Sure. So
I haven't innovated the definition of woman.
So common definition versus actual scientific definition versus kind of like the categorical definition. These are all like things that can be heavily contested. But in what you would call a woman, there are things that fit under that category that are not capable of having children. So why would it be so bad to include trans women under that?
I didn't say it would be bad.
Wait, so then what's the problem? Then what do we disagree with?
Well, the problem is the essential attack on the social construct that is a woman, because
It's not an attack. Again, if you want to talk about, Carl's whole world falls into people who can have babies, people who are fertile and can successfully deliver a child, and those who can't. That's fundamentally his definition, but that's not how the word woman has ever been used in the past, or signals. You know, people don't stop calling themselves a woman when they hit menopause. Women don't do that when they hit menopause because they're no longer fertile. So again, he's just talking so much shit.
Because the thing is, saying trans women are women is a statement that will necessarily lead to circumstances where a part of the gender role that is woman will not be fulfilled. And so the person who was engaging with the trans woman, expecting that aspect of the gender role to be fulfilled, will find themselves necessarily not only disappointed, but I guess deceived in a way.
So this is it. This is really what it comes down to. Carl's transphobia. And this is maybe the most insightful thing. This is his rationale. If we don't designate, if we don't find a way to discriminate against trans women, then it might be the case that a cis man becomes attracted to someone based on who they are as a person and finds out later that they're trans. And then they have to actually deal, that person, that guy, or whoever it is, you know, maybe it's a lesbian woman too, I don't want to discriminate, but let's say, I think Carl's thinking of heterosexual men. If a man looks across the bar, finds a woman incredibly hot, makes eye contact, flirts with her all night long, goes over, they chat, they talk, they have a great conversation, they like the same things, it's amazing how well they're hitting it off, and this person isn't wearing a neon sign saying, I'm a trans woman. Somehow that is harmful to the guy because he might actually have to deal with the fact that he's attracted to a trans woman. That's Carl's entire, basically, and this is what I think. All of this fighting over excluding trans women from the category of women is to protect men who are insecure about their own sexualities and how they're attracted to people. And Carl wants to baby-proof the world like we do in a lot of ways for men, right? We criminalize women's nipples. Why? To protect men. You know, just other things as well in terms of the way that society forces women, you know, to behave in certain ways. And it all comes down to stopping men from having, you know, their sexual thoughts. I think the nipple one is probably the best example of that. In the past, there's been laws about, you know, like how much ankle you could show, but that's changed over time. This is also, it comes down to his transphobic fears that he might find a trans woman attractive. That's what it really comes down to, I think.
Wait, this is simply solved with a single question. When you're having a conversation with somebody and you bring up children, you say, I would like to have children, and the other person says, I can't have children. How does that conversation damage the role of women or the social category of woman in the West?
And that's completely separate from the issue of being trans or not. Breeding has nothing to do with being trans, and yet Carl wants to conflate them because he wants to say, look, women's purpose is to get screwed by men and impregnated by them, and therefore if I can't put my seed in her and have her raise my offspring, she's not really a woman to me. And also, what if I find myself sexually attracted to trans women? What does that say about me if she has, you know, she's not going to have an operation? Then what is that? Yeah, it's not about you. It's about other people in their lives, idiots.
Because of the way it's approached and the things that will happen. I mean, you could easily describe it as transphobic to ask a person who you think is trans if they can have children.
Nobody.
Okay, I mean, it's not criminal. It might be a bit nosy. It might be a bit rude. You know, I mean, nobody's. To be fair, you know, I haven't had this, but I've had people I know who have had problems with, you know, fertility or things like that, and they'll go see somebody else, you know, a friend of a friend, and the person will turn to him and say, oh, when are you two going to start having babies? You know, you've been married for so many years now. When are you going to start having babies? And that person has to say and reveal to a complete stranger at a party when they were having a perfectly good time, we're not able to have children. Or, you know, I can't have children. And now you're suddenly bearing your soul to a perfect stranger about maybe something that's really a hard and painful thing for you. So Carl's just conflation of fertility and womanness it is disconnected from the trans issue entirely, but he wants to conflate it because it's his only justification for discriminating against trans women.
In any part of the...
and also his focus on women part of it too. He doesn't seem to be as bothered, at least it doesn't appear to me, to be as bothered by trans men. But trans women, he is really focused on really excluding them by definition because of this whole having sex and babies thing.
Serious world would say that. Aside from 4 follower people,
there are lots of places in the unserious world
so
they'll say that.
Yeah, because on 4 follower accounts on Twitter, you can find any stupid opinion.
Yeah.
But like actual people,
you can find this in people who are quite.
I would love to see any source ever.
This is the opinion of the police in Great Britain, you know.
Again, lying.
The opinion of the police in Great Britain is that if you ask somebody while you're on a date, would you like to have children or can you have children? That's transphobic. That's the position of the police in Great Britain.
They certainly could interpret it that way.
No, he's lying. And this is it. He's being called out on his lies. So he just says, oh, it could be interpreted that way. Talk about weasel words. It is the case that, oh, is it the case that this? Oh, it could be interpreted that way. He's such a, like, just weak, reactive, receding shit stain.
Has it ever been interpreted that way?
Possibly. I'd have to have a look.
Okay,
I don't care he knows nothing. He knows nothing. He can't say, yes, in 2017 this thing happened. No, he's like, oh, it could be the case, and I'll just make this up. Oh, maybe it happened. I'm just asking questions here. I'm just raising possibilities. When he's not, he's just obfuscating.
So generally, for any serious person I've ever heard had this conversation before, I have never heard any trans rights activist ever say, if you ask a trans person if they can have children, you are being transphobic. Now, that's not to say that there might be ways you could phrase it. So, for instance, in the way that you approach it, I would definitely say it's transphobic because you seem to imply that a woman that can't have children is not a woman, which is not only damaging to trans women, but even to normal women, or what you would consider normal women. So, like,
hang on, stop there, because I think you're kind of hitting on something. I think that there are women who definitely feel like less of a woman because they can't have children.
Completely irrelevant. Look, even if that were the case, it has nothing to do with the kinds of things Carl's talking about, but he just sort of reacts in the moment in order to put Destiny on the defensive, coming up with random stuff about how some women might feel. Well, what is that? How some women might feel doesn't relate at all to whether or not the category of women is expansive enough to include trans women. And it is.
And I think that a sterile man would probably feel like less of a man as well.
By the way, yeah, all you guys out there who elected to have a vasectomy in order to not have to worry about procreation anymore, Carl thinks you might feel like less of a man. So just, you know, if you want to be insulted by that, I would, with his wild, baseless speculation that is just convenient to his argument, based out of nothing, there's that.
Yeah, but we don't want people to feel that way. Don't you think that?
I don't know. I'm just trying to. You can, yeah, I agree that it's not nice.
On that particular thing, do you think it would be good, or do you want society to feel like if a man can't have a child, he should view himself as less of a man?
It's not that I want this. It's that the problem that you will always run up to is the fact that definitions necessarily leave something outside of what they're defining, and those things that are left outside of it may not be happy with being left outside, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you should change the definition for their feelings.
We absolutely
the whole thing about because the status quo is the status quo, we shouldn't change the status quo, because then what would happen if we change the status quo?
No, I don't agree. I think that the thing, it depends what it is.
Well, I mean like every definition, every category that we've created is a socially constructed category that we create to serve human happiness. So why wouldn't we redefine it? The category of man and woman are socially defined categories. We could change it if we want to make more people happy. Why wouldn't we?
Well, by that reasoning, why define anything?
Because I just said because we get some utility out of it.
I don't think you get utility out of words that don't have solid definitions. I think the word becomes useless.
I never said we couldn't have solid definitions.
You just did. If we
I said we could change the definition.
We can have expansive
but if we're changing the definition to mean something that is
more
not
expansive
within what we consider the definition useful to be defining.
The status quo definition, the old definition, the outdated definition, the outmoded definition.
then you're not really. I mean, if if the term woman can be used to define someone that is biologically male, then it's no longer an adult human female.
By the way, guys, the Constitution says all men are created equal. We can't possibly reinterpret the word men in that case to mean all human beings and include women and non-binary people. So it is absolutely our duty. We cannot interpret the law in the United States or the values of the United States except as being for men, because according to Carl, it's that biological category. When you use a word, you can't reinterpret it, otherwise it loses all meaning. So I guess we're just going to have to say, all men, and definitely not women or children or non-binary people, are created equal. Just because just because Carl, Kevin wouldn't say this at all, Carl's purity definition of how words cannot be reinterpreted to expand who they include. That's a naughty no-no thing when it comes to gender, but apparently it's fine when we're looking at the Constitution.
First of all, the term woman, under your definition, probably already does define some people that are biologically male, and you don't even realize it. Firstly. Secondly, when we use... How
would that be the case?
Because
it's really astounding he is not aware that there's a spectrum of chromosomal combinations, that we don't always end up with XX or XY, that there's actually variations in how those can be combined. That is a variation along the possible spectrum of ways that those genes can be combined. But Carl, of course, that's like beyond 6th grade biology, so this is very difficult for him to process.
Guarantee you that I could show you pictures of XY chromosome women that have there's a name for the condition.
Androgen insensitive.
But basically you have extreme androgen insensitivity, and you can grow up your whole life and completely look like a woman, 100%, and you would look at her and you would say, well, let me see her vagina. Oh, she has one. That's a real woman. And then you would look at the genes and you would say, oh shit, they have XY chromosomes, and you would have no idea what to say, right? So this idea that there's some hardcore...
Okay, so that's an abnormality, right?
It's not an abnormality, it's a variation. And this is another sort of like pathology that people who are who want to assert gender as a binary, is that they dismiss the variation that exists in nature. So here is my position as someone who works in the sciences. Our objective should always be to include as many observations as we are capable of observing. The point of our science isn't to say, oh, well, let's just be convenient and leave out 10% of the population because they don't fit within this category. That's sloppy science. The question is, how do we capture that 10% so we can model their behavior? So the whole premise is just flawed in that way.
It's absolutely something that exists, though. What I'm saying is
but that's a genetic abnormality, isn't it?
What does that have to do with my argument?
Well, what your argument is, if we... Well,
something being rare doesn't make it an abnormality. Abnormality carries a sort of evaluative connotation to it. Like normal is good and abnormal is bad. And Carl wants to smuggle in this ought is, these oughts into his is statements. Using a term like abnormality makes it sound something, that's pathological, as opposed to variation in the natural spectrum, which is more accurately what it is.
Well, what I would argue is that if we're going to define things, then we're not going to be defining them to satisfy the abnormal fringe cases. We're going to be defining them to satisfy the...
And again, this shows that Carl is anti-science. You don't improve your understanding of the natural world by discriminating against certain observations because they're inconvenient to your normative worldview. That is the worst kind of science. It's not even, at that point, you're violating the principles of science. The question is, how do you capture more information, more observations, and include them so your picture is improved as to what the world actually is? Because the job of science is not to do studies to justify the way we want the world to be. The purpose of science is to confront our biases and our ignorances with the data and the theory testing that we do in order to transform our understanding to be more accurate over time. He's really just using science in the process of it in a wrong way.
The vast majority of cases in which they'll be useful.
Okay,
that's
when
what it's going to be most useful.
Sure.
Right?
So would you agree that we make definitions in society for them to be useful?
Yes, I think
When
that's
you
fair.
say we make a definition to be useful, what do you mean by useful? What do you mean by that?
To be used and facilitate whatever interactions that need to be facilitated
Cool.
by presumably the largest number of people.
Awesome. I agree with that. So we create definitions in society and we organize categories because they're useful to people insofar as that they serve some need to make most of us happy. If we can expand the category of woman to include trans woman, I don't see what the problem is for that.
Because it's not accurate. I mean, like these definitions. This is what I'm trying to say.
Wait, can we do this word by word? Let's do this word by word. When you
Oh, sorry, I muted myself there for a second. Yeah, not accurate. It's just not true that it's not accurate. That's just not true. Woman is the word woman is not describing fecundity or the ability to reproduce in any way. And so Carl is just lying when he says he's trying to be more accurate. By the way, when we start, I'm going to bring up some recommendations on really old school videos you guys can watch to understand a bit better the philosophy of language and to get a better understanding of Destiny's point and also how wrong Carl is if this isn't something you're as familiar with. So I'm going to do that research while you guys listen.
Yeah, okay,
not
no,
accurate.
Listen. The concept of woman is not a transcendental concept. It is biologically essential.
No, it's not. Wait, what?
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Show me where
well,
it's...
I disagree.
Well, no, you
okay, I'll just let it go.
you can't disagree. You're just
so many
wrong.
times already.
There's nowhere in this...
I can disagree.
He's just wrong. Destiny is right.
It doesn't matter what you think here. There's...
Well, no, actually, it doesn't matter what Carl thinks because Carl has no idea about the philosophy of language or necessary and sufficient conditions or any of the rigorous kinds of thoughts that you could go through to come up with a logical conclusion. He's going on his fifis. He's going with stuff that he makes up. And this is why he's self-contradictory and why he has no depth of understanding and he can't cite any real examples. It's because he's not engaging with the real world. He's engaging with his perception of the real world through his bigoted transphobic filter. So...
If a woman in standard usage of English, or just any language, which going back into the midst of time has been adult human female, then that is a biologically essentialist word. That's the purpose of it. So, it's designed to reflect a physical biological reality.
There you go. It is. So we have categories that we've created because we believe that they reflect some underlying physical reality. The concept of female, that isn't a real thing. That's not something that exists in nature. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, Destiny's right here in terms of the way that we as human beings use our conscious minds and our ability to understand and communicate language to construct words that are then mapped onto some observations in the world that we use in that way. But it's not like nature determines these categories from us pre-handed. We build them up ourselves. That's the problem with like mistaking the finger for the moon. I don't know if you're familiar with the Zen idea, but it's the purpose of pointing out when you're worshiping the finger, you're praying to the finger or looking at the finger, not the moon, is when you're looking at the teachings. In this case, the teachings of Buddha are the thing that the teachings themselves, somehow the collection of books and words, are the thing that are important to achieve enlightenment, rather than them being the vehicle by which you, through your mind, see the goal yourself, see the destination. So to say that you're mistaking your finger or the finger for the moon is to say you're mistaking the object for the destination and goal. And Carl wants to kind of skip over that role that we as conscious beings have played in creating the status quo and treat the status quo like it's some sort of separate thing from us that we just inherited and we have no control over how it's, we just have to accept that this is how it is. And it's completely untrue.
I don't agree with you.
Okay, if we eliminate all human beings, where do you find the concept of female?
In the animal world, I suppose.
No, you don't.
Without the language to describe female or the component parts, you don't have the ability to identify that. Because Carl, again, can't seem to understand that pre-language, pre-linguistic existence was most of, what has existed throughout history, and it's only through the emergence of us as a species and language that we started to frame things in this way, and yet he thinks language is somehow independent of our creation of it.
No, you can find some things because what you have is you have some things that have collections of certain features, and if we want, we can label them in certain ways, right? And that's what we do as people. We label things because we get some value out of it. We have people that generally have vaginas, can give birth to people. We've got people that generally have dicks that fuck people, right? We call some of these females. We call some of these females, we call some of these males. But there is nothing in science that says we must have this category female. We must have this category of male. Or that
we could have a category of for people with female genitals who have, not had sex, and those who had sex but not been pregnant, and those who've been pregnant and had a delivery, and those who've never had kids. And we could have a separate word for each one of those categories, and trans women would fall into a lot of them, but not every woman would always necessarily fall into every category. But we've shortened that to woman, which is a very broad term, to be very encompassing. And this is, again, I'm sort of restating Destiny's point, but language is not, we don't inherit the categories that our language uses. We construct the categories, and because we construct them, we have the power to redefine them at any point in time in order to improve society. That's the basic point.
No, it's philosophy that we need to think about there. Science can only tell us data. We need to be able to interpret that.
No, science is a process by which we uncover data that we then reason out conclusions that we call facts. Just, again, quibbling.
And for that we need philosophy.
Exactly. So philosophically, when we're creating these categories, we have to understand that the reason at the end of the day we create these categories like male and female isn't because science tells us to, because science can never make these kinds of claims. It's because we as a society have decided we want this definition because it makes all of us happier. That's generally how everything works in reality.
No, we have it to reflect a biological reality about human beings.
He just can't substantiate that. He keeps repeating it, but it doesn't make it any more true. He keeps thinking, again, it's a very naive empiricism, or maybe not even empiricism is the right word, but it's like Carl's never moved beyond the Enlightenment in terms of his understanding of science. And one of the things, if he actually read philosophy and studied a bit more, he would learn that, initially in the Middle Ages there was a belief in terms of epistemology that, as Paul writes in the Bible, that God puts knowledge on your hearts, and that somehow there's this innate knowledge that we're all born with. And that idea just didn't work very well because, it's not true. It's just empirically not verifiable because it doesn't actually, that's not how it happens. That causal process does not exist. So then Locke had the idea, tabula rasa, that our understanding is based on our impressions, the things that we take in through our senses, and it is through our experiences and processing our information of the natural world that we develop knowledge. And then, as we move along, you see people like Kant talking about the way that that one of the components of how we perceive knowledge is our physical construction. Our bodies take in knowledge only in a certain way, so we can't say our knowledge is comprehensive because we are limited by our bodies and the way that our brains organize information. So again, this sort of rarefication of an objective reality that our language merely reflects it's kind of went out, by the 1900s. That sort of simplistic thinking about the relationship between language and our experience of the noumenal world or the phenomenal world. The noumenal world is the one that, the phenomenal world is the one we experience in our minds as processing, the experience being processed through our brains of the noumenal. So there's a step there. I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but just to kind of throw that out there.
Why do we care about reflecting a biological reality about human beings?
Because we have to live with one another.
Because it makes...
we have to reflect biological realities of human beings because we have to live with one another. What does that even mean? Like, honestly, that's such a non sequitur. There's such a non sequitur in that.
It makes us happier when we can organize these differences. We get use out of them.
Yes, exactly. It makes us happier when we organize these differences.
Okay, because we get utility out of them, right? But we could organize.
There is certainly a utilitarian argument to be made. Yeah.
Sure,
but I think that it's probably deeper than that, and I think there are probably other reasons that these things are tied. That are, again, I can't stress enough. I do believe that this is very biologically essentialist.
I'm so I've got in the other room. I've got my Jordan B. Peterson. I'm so tempted to just get the Jordan B. Peterson Muppet doll out here and pretend to be Sargon. Because he's kind of channeling some Peterson here.
And I think that trying to separate that is ridiculous. Because I mean, as soon as you separate, if you say that gender is transcendental, okay, why did we create it in the first place?
Because we have some utility out of it. It's essential to recognize that every category that we construct as humans, we do so.
But that's a biological essentialist argument.
No, it's not. My argument is not biological. What?
What's it categorizing?
What is it categorizing? We taking a description of some things that we hope are representative of some underlying traits, and we're assigning them, we're ascribing them to certain categories.
Biological traits, right?
Yes.
So
biological essentialism, your naturalist.
Like, for instance, wearing clothing associated with women, or having, bodies, or taking hormones to, all of that would then conform to the biological woman category that Carl's talking about. But of course he wants to find a false way to separate out trans women, because he's worried about being attracted to trans women, or men having to be attracted to trans women. Apparently this is the only objection that cis men might be attracted to trans women is literally the only objection he's raised so far. If anyone else can find one. James says, my brain is wilting. I'm right there with you, buddy. I am so right there with you. That's why we're doing this as a group, because we're all here to support each other. To hold hands and support each other through the stupidity of Carl. We do this stuff in groups to get through it.
This argument implies that because something exists in a certain way in nature, we ought to recognize that difference. But this is not how we construct categories in real life. For instance, there's a million.
No, I don't agree. I think that is in fact how we construct categories in real life.
He's just so pre-philosophy 101. He's so pre-philosophy. He's no idea what he's talking about. Absolutely none.
Then why don't we categorize people by the number of moles on their body? We could do that.
I would imagine that utility is something that we would apply here.
Okay, so what you just did is, instead of, you avoided the science and you said, well, hold on, I'm going to appeal to utility. That's my...
This is the is-ought distinction, right? Because, again, Destiny's point here is you are selecting out this particular physical characteristic as being important, but really when we wanted to do these categories, we could use anything. Because, science, if you look at it from a purely material point of view without any values, there's no way to distinguish between a collection of information. Like, so these people have more than 500 moles, and these people have, between 500 and 200. Or these people's feet are such a length. They're all arbitrary. It's not until human values are introduced to that descriptive information that people start rank ordering things. And Carl is missing that step. He's assuming that because something like reproduction, he finds it valuable, or he claims it's the purpose of nature, that's a subjective evaluation, that somehow that is now independent, that's just a fact that exists in the world.
Argument. What I'm telling you is that every time we construct a category, we're appealing to the utility of the category, not some scientific or biological realism or constructivism. Or
I agree, but the category itself is a biological category.
No, there's no such thing as a biological category. Categories don't exist biologically. No, there's not.
We choose to. Look, no,
yeah, we choose. No. Wait, listen. Please. Wait, you just said.
Fundamentally.
If Carl would just shut his freaking mouth and let Destiny talk, Destiny could school him on this. But Carl is so busy running his dumb mouth and shutting his dumb ears that he stays in his dumb head and he doesn't get any smarter. Either that or he's being willfully stupid and he's trying to, talk his way out of this.
Misunderstanding what I'm saying.
What you just said betrayed your argument.
No, I promise you absolutely are. Right?
You just said that we choose to. The fact that we make that choice, that choice is a normative choice. We're doing something out of a moral compulsion. It's a normative choice.
No, it's not even moral. I mean, it probably is both also moral.
No, it
is. There is also a practical necessity.
No,
a practical necessity is still a subjective evaluation. So because our species reproduces through sex, that doesn't necessarily mean that has some kind of inherent value in the world. Whatever species, it's a fact that happens, but Carl wants to again rarefy this and make it somehow an independent truth that we all have to obey this independent truth, because he doesn't actually have a good argument. So he has to appeal to this false authority to try to justify his status quo transphobia.
The necessity,
of course there is.
Just because we make a choice to organize things in a certain way doesn't mean that choice is necessarily backed by reality, and that reality tells us we have to make that choice. So for instance, I could have 100 people and I could separate them based on height, I could separate them based on gender, I could separate them based on eye color, etc., a million different traits, but nothing in science is going to tell me what I should separate them on. I have to make that normative choice.
I don't care about the science of it, really. It doesn't really matter about the science.
Again, Destiny's face, my face. Destiny's face, my face. Destiny's face, my face. What? Just what? you've been going on and on about the biological imperative and biological categories and science says this and breeding. Now he's going to just throw all that out and say it's not important. Damn.
Because it comes down to the interpretation of it. And at the end of the day, there is no questioning the biological reality that male and female as distinct sexes do exist. Even if humans weren't around to categorize them, the animals themselves would categorize themselves in that way.
But there's
they don't even need a language.
The animals wouldn't categorize themselves. And this is it. This is fundamental. Our linguistic using language is so natural to us. Framing things in terms of language and categories and how we organize the world is so natural to us, we don't even realize we're doing it. And that's what Destiny's point was in saying, remove human consciousness from nature. It will still function, but the category of male and female won't exist the way it does within language, because it's merely functioning nature. It is just the operation. You can talk about, whatever thing happening in nature. It's not going to somehow have the category of our language inherent in it. We bring language to the material world. It doesn't need it. It doesn't necessarily, it's just not changed by our observation and interaction with it. Just linguistically, and we're not dependent on it for determining our linguistic categories.
Which to do this, this is such a primal thing. It's done by pheromones, man. Right?
We could also categorize people based on the number of bruises they have, based on the color of their hair.
Could, but that would be stupid, and only an idiot would suggest that.
Your language is so loaded. How can you not understand this? You just said
Yes, I'm going to call out Nail Fleur here. It's Carl's transcendental biological essentialist theology. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're 21 minutes into it. We're halfway through all of the stuff I've sat through already. So, and I also noticed that we're having a really good time. I've not only gone an hour, I'm actually going to go do a 2-hour episode. So we're going to roll through this till the top of the hour, and then I will give you guys some recommendations on really entertaining old school debates or discussions on the BBC by a bunch of old white guys. But the conversations are very much about the Western philosophy and developments in linguistics. In particular, I want to share with you one on Wittgenstein, and then there's another one too. It wasn't on logical positivism, but I think it had airs in it. And also there's a really famous Cyril interview that I want to share with you guys as well. So I'm going to find those and post them up. But let's wrap up this last 15 minutes of empathizing with Destiny's repeated frustrations with Carl and his complete lack of understanding of language, philosophy, or science.
It would be stupid. You're begging the question.
Of reality. If you want to argue that trying to reflect reality is loaded, okay.
And again, this is whole thing. Like he is sneaky. It's the is-ought distinction, first of all, and also Carl isn't just saying that Carl's not reflecting reality. He's imposing the value of breeding women onto what qualifies as being categorized as a woman, and nature doesn't tell us that. That's Carl's trying to smuggle that in.
I don't care. What I'm saying is disprove what I'm saying, and you can't, because I'm describing reality.
You are literally disproving your own statements with every sentence you speak, and you don't realize it. When you're saying, you keep saying that your reality is, I'm choosing the reality. The choices that you make are arbitrary and unjustified. That you're not.
These aren't choices that I made, and then they're not arbitrary, and they are just.
You're missing a.
He doesn't understand it. This is why it's so frustrating. It's like he really thinks he understands philosophy, and what is that line from A Fish Called Wanda, when Otto says to Wanda, "Apes don't read philosophy," and she replies back, "Yes, they do, Otto. They just don't understand it." And that is, Carl is an ape reading philosophy because he sees the words, but he's actually not, because he's not willing to lower himself to be educated by another person, admitting he doesn't know something, and actually, instead of challenging accurate understanding of philosophical concepts when they are presented to him, to take them on board. And that's what the most frustrating thing is. It's like he's impervious to learning.
Deeper level, okay? What you're saying is that male and female refer to some underlying physical property. I don't disagree with that, of course. Yes. However, I could design a million categories that could refer to any number of underlying properties. Now, whether or not we choose to use male and female, or whether or not we choose to use redhead or brunette, that's an arbitrary choice. We don't find.
And one would say, in terms of the biological structures, female is a set category. But if a woman has her reproductive organs removed, Carl would say she's no longer a woman. And this just does not make sense, because in truth, that is not how we use the word woman in our society. Absolutely not. So Carl is actually showing that his use is not based on reality, whereas Destiny's point about expanding the definition of woman, which is not a descriptor of fertility, is entirely possible, and not only that, would make society a better place. So there are good reasons to do it. But Carl can't process this.
The answer on what we should categorize.
That's not true. I don't agree that that's arbitrary. I think that there are physical imperatives that make us choose these things.
So I'm just going to put the is-ought distinction in there. He's saying because this happens in nature, it is natural and right. Therefore, we ought to restrict our language to only include those things. But that's a logical fallacy.
Because of frankly, they're the path of least resistance.
Okay, can you tell me then, why ought we value the category of male and female?
Because there is a distinct connection with the social category of man and woman to male and female. Okay, these are things that we use in our social lives.
Okay, so you're describing things to me. You're giving me descriptive claims. What I'm asking you is, why ought we value male and female? Don't tell me that we do. I'm asking you, why should we? Why ought we value the category of male and female?
We are social animals, and we need to interact with one another, and we have...
He really doesn't understand what Destiny's asking here. Right? So when Destiny's saying, why ought we do this, he's trying to get away from, he's trying to point to that is-ought distinction. There are these things in society. Now you want to make an ought claim. And Carl's just basically saying, well, because we have a biological reproductive function that has to, he's not really understanding why the two parts of this are different.
Inherited a very effective way of doing this, especially considering it's such a complicated issue. And this is something that it's been gifted to us from the millions of previous generations who had to struggle with the same things. And
the patriarchy is a gift, ladies. The patriarchy, where men try to control your fertility and deny you property until you agitate for it, and organize with the religion to say raping a wife raping a wife is impossible. All of that, because the result of that is that our offspring didn't all die off. That was a gift. So, yeah, you just waked up to Kristi doing another live stream. I'm on holiday today, so I'm deciding to share a little bit with you guys. So we're doing a Carl is dumb and Destiny is owning him. But let's just go back a little bit, because that full statement is so stupid. I think it's important that we hear it in full.
It's such a complicated issue, and this is something that it's been gifted to us from.
Oh, sorry, I gotta go back.
Millions of previous generations.
I gotta go back a bit more to about 20 seconds of stupid, I think. That should be enough.
Okay, so you're describing things to me. You're giving me descriptive claims. What I'm asking you is, why ought we value male and female? Don't tell me that we do. I'm asking you, why should we? Why ought we value the category of male and female?
We are social animals, and we need to interact with one another, and we have inherited a very effective way of doing this, especially considering it's such a complicated issue. And this is something that it's been gifted to us from the millions of previous generations who had to struggle with the same things, and they came up with a fairly workable system that works for something like, what was it, 99.3% of people or something. So that's pretty good, really.
Doesn't actually have anything to do with the categories that he asked about. Just saying reproduction is good and this system works. It has nothing to do with what it was actually asked.
Okay, why ought we value that though?
Because it's working.
He's like a child. He's just like a child. Yeah, it works, therefore we should value it. Like, no, that's not an answer to the question about the use of the terms. He's saying because human beings have reproduced successfully, we should only use this language in this way. Those things don't map onto each other. They're not causally connected.
Okay, so let's say that we take this, okay? Let's say that we say that our moral values ought to come from things that have worked, and I won't make you define worked in the past because we could go a million different ways with that, right? What if I make the same argument in favor of, say, slavery, or in favor of, say, lack of women's rights, or in favor of, say, hunter-gatherer lifestyles? Like,
because there are, I mean, you could make that in favor of hunter-gatherer lifestyles. In favor of slavery, you're obviously violating someone's human rights. But I mean, do you consider gender roles to be a violation of a person's human rights?
Can I just say what a stupid question that is? to start with. Just like the wording of it is completely idiotic.
On a consequentialist level, yeah, if you're constantly denying somebody the ability to exist happily in society, yeah, I would consider that to be a pretty bad thing.
You would think someone who's a libertarian or claims to be a libertarian and claims to be for individuals doing the best they can in a society would understand that systematic oppressions in a society are barriers to people's individual opportunity. Therefore, a society without those kinds of discrimination barriers based on arbitrary or unimportant characteristics are something that need to be addressed and removed in order to allow for the most optimal social freedom that can exist.
Yeah, but is that a violation of the human rights?
What do you mean by... I don't believe in human rights.
Like
What do you mean by
girlfriend
human rights?
cheating on you isn't
Sure.
a violation of your human rights, but it's a pretty bad thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by human rights.
I don't know.
Like...
I don't know if people have the right to determine their own gender.
The stupid, it burns. It burns. It burns. It burns. All right, so obviously, Carl's trying to make some sort of straw man about the, Human Rights Convention and a legal right or whatever else. Even if you don't believe that that you can sue someone in the international courts of human rights because of something, it doesn't mean that someone's dignity. A lot of human rights stuff comes down to basic dignity. Does this thing degrade me, or does it elevate someone's dignity? And when it comes to this kind of stuff, yeah, Carl wants to throw in a buzzword like human rights to, again, distract from the fundamental issue and make this another straw man argument that he can say about, oh, people want to make it a human right. Like, you brought up the human rights. No one else is talking about that but you, Carl. See you later, Matthew. Thanks for stopping by.
I don't know if they do. They might have the freedom to try.
Wait, so who has that right?
Call that a right? Well, I don't know. I mean, a lot of gender happens in other people's heads. So it's this the thing. Like, it's such an unbelievably complex thing, and
it's not though. It's very simple. It's actually incredibly
that's
simple.
Bollocks.
It's not. It's so simple. It's very simple.
No, you're just being a contrarian. I mean, like, no one with any sort of credible understanding of this would say this was simple.
Every single person. When I say simple, what I mean is if you understand the arguments, it's very easy to start at a very foundational level and get all the way to where we are now, right? If we
but I don't think that you do understand the arguments. I think there are lots of arguments, and I think that it's important to be aware of the foundation with which you're starting, because you're starting from transcendental foundation.
He doesn't even. Again, I would love. Of course, he won't. Carl can't define that term. He doesn't define it anytime I hear it. He throws around this word, and what I think he means by it is that it's changeable or shiftable, and that's not how I understand the word transcendent or transcendental to be used. Again, I don't know that he really knows what words mean. So.
Saying that gender has no connection to the biological entity that is a human being.
Strawman, by the way. Yeah, exactly, UT. Transcendental. He keeps throwing around this word as if it has some sort of understood meaning, when really he's kind of pulling a mundane mat and just throwing in a fancy word in there because he thinks it means ability to be moved across. So that's what we're dealing with here. Your brain is transcending.
Here, you know what? I'll try it. You can stop me when I'm wrong, okay? So let's look at universal categories. So a universal category is a human constructed thing that is the form of something, right? Let's say that we say like a chair, right? That's a universal category. Now, what is a chair? I mean, we can argue a million times. Is it made out of wood, blah, blah, blah. But there's like a universal form of a chair, right? Now, all categories are arbitrary constructs that don't...
Hang on,
go ahead.
Hang
okay.
on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. You said, okay, so you're saying that there's a universal form of a chair. Are you arguing like the Plato's world of forms?
Sure.
Carl's trying to show whatever philosophy he's heard from other people.
I don't think that's a wise idea.
Okay, well then maybe you'll hammer me down on this one then. Okay. Do you think that the form of a chair exists somewhere? Do you think that that's stored somewhere in the world? The universal form of a chair?
Well, a chair is a platonic form. I would suggest that what we have defined to be a chair doesn't have a universal ideal. No.
Okay, cool. So then I would take that same argument and I would apply that to every category that we've constructed. What is a computer? That definition is expanded. What is a cell phone?
Well, I agree. I don't even think the category of woman has a universal ideal.
Okay, cool. So when we would build ourselves all the way up to saying, okay, well, what are some socially constructed categories we have? Right now, we can both agree that the categories of white and black are very constructed, and those have changed over time as well. Well, also the category of male and female, or woman and man is also changed as well.
I think there's a definite biological component to the categories of black and white.
But only because we say there has to be. That's the only reason why. That doesn't come from science.
But we only say they have to be because we want the terminology to have a use in our everyday lives.
Yes.
Because what you're suggesting, I know, exactly. That's you agreeing with me.
Yes.
Because what you're suggesting is that if we don't do that, like the alternative to what you're suggesting is that we don't really have intelligible language.
No.
Yes.
Woman and male can be the same they are now, but we expand them to include trans people because it makes those people's lives better, and it doesn't do any damage to the currently existing categories.
That's the argument. You expand the category of woman to include trans people because it doesn't fundamentally change the category, and it makes other people's lives easy and nice. So, yeah, Seb, I don't know. It's hard to keep up with Carl in his spew of BS. So it's possible that he said, yes, the definition of woman is expandable. It's very possible because he doesn't have a core belief. He's just contrarian.
Why would you not do that?
It does do damage to the currently existing categories.
How?
Because it makes them misrepresentative of the thing that they are. Like an adult.
So if you use the word woman on a trans woman, then that is bad, according to Carl's logic, because it's misrepresenting her ability to breed. As would a postmenopausal woman's, or a woman who's infertile, or a woman who was on birth control and was not able to be, impregnated at any given time.
Adult human female is someone we can biologically identify, and you want to include that to expand that to include the category of adult human male? And that's ridiculous.
Okay,
then the definition disappears.
No, it doesn't disappear. I don't know why you think that just because you expand a definition, all of a sudden it becomes worthless.
Because Carl thinks simplistically in black and white like a child and has no ability to carry nuance in his head. So.
Let's say that's true.
Man and woman are dichotomized.
First of all, they're not a dichotomy.
No, God, this is how dumb he is, how uneducated he is. And I don't know if it's because he doesn't understand the concept of dichotomy, or he just threw in dichotomous because he thinks it means one of the, like two things. It's not dichotomous, and he.
Either a man or a woman.
No. First of all, it's
and
not.
And if you expand it to include both, then they
this is an anti-science argument. So if you want to say that, that's fine. But the distribution between male and female is bimodal. It's not binary. It is bimodal. Yeah. There's a ton of
I don't know. Bimodal means that most of the observations occur at 2 peak points, as opposed to a binary, which says all observations can fit within one of 2 categories. Again, this is Destiny actually using correct, precise language, but I have a feeling that bimodal versus binary just went like this over Carl's head. Hey, Kevs! How you doing, mate? By the way, I got a message this morning from Kevin in my messages going, I went something like, Sargon is such a moron. And because you guys had brought this to my attention, or I'd heard about it yesterday and said, I know, I already watched it. So welcome, Kevin. I'm doing this so you don't have to. But we might. I'm going to be wrapping up here. So if you want to actually dunk on Carl a little bit in a happy hour, I wouldn't be opposed to that, because there's plenty of dunking. I got my donuts. Let's dunk a little bit more on Carl. So we're gonna go for I'm already a little bit more, just a little bit more, and then we'll end. I keep promising we're gonna end, and then I don't.
I appreciate that, but we're not talking about science. We're talking about sociology.
Yes, he does this all the time. This again demonstrates to me that Carl doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, because when Destiny is talking about language and social constructs and the way that we use words for our benefit, Carl appeals to science, saying, well, the science is telling us this, and we are bound by what science says, and we have to look to the observable world and what we can know from our science. Now, when Destiny is owning him on this, he's like, oh, it's not about the science, it's about sociology. Honestly, the guy is such a hack. He is such an uneducated, unread hack on this. And it's phenomenal to me that people pay him to make them stupider. That's like he and Dankula both get paid to spread ignorance. And he makes, he's got a lot of ignorance to spread.
Okay.
And that means we're talking about interpretation.
Sure. So if we talk about it from a sociological point of view, what damage or harm can come from me including trans people under the definition of male or female?
Well, on its surface, not much, it appears, right? On the surface, it seems that not much. No. But then you've got to get into the sort of like, what is a father and a mother? Because then you've...
So, goalpost shifting. This is literally what he did. He shifted the goalposts. Well, if we got this thing over here, or slippery soap, you could call it a slippery soap argument. If we're allowed to change this definition, then we're just going to destroy the whole nuclear family. Nuclear or nuclear? I probably said the wrong one. By the way, I see that Anthony said, when is happy hour? Sorry, I just found this channel. Kevin's been hosting the happy hours of late. We haven't scheduled one for this week yet, but we generally have it like on a Wednesday or a Friday night. Destiny is pretty dumb too, actually. Well, I can't speak about Destiny on every single topic, but on this one, he's actually doing a good job. And I'm not saying I agree with Destiny 100%, but in this case, he is speaking about things far more accurately than Carl does.
You've severed the connection, the sort of biological connection of father and mother, and then you're starting to get into, and again, that's not accurate.
Let's do this. Let's do this.
He just again and again, Carl tries to justify it by the family, by reproduction, by breeding women. Everything comes down to women make babies for men, and if you call someone a woman who can't make a baby for a man, what are the men's to do? Can we think of the poor men's? I mean, that seems to be the substance of his argument.
Slowly, step by step. So you're telling me that if I say trans men are men and trans women are women, that I've destroyed what it means to be a father and a mother? What do you mean by that?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you can make the female the father and the male the mother.
Oh, okay. Can you tell me how this is damaged? Like, are you saying that like a trans man couldn't be like a real father, or a trans woman couldn't be like a real mother to like a child, or?
Well, a trans... Sorry, it's remembering the way around.
See, now Carl is just realizing that he's being totally owned, that trans parents are parents all the time. Lots of people who have their kids and raise them and bring them, and then transition later in life. So, again, he's just not talking about any realistic category. Carl is just babbling on based on whatever is coming into his head at the time.
A woman who becomes a man is never going to provide the Y gametes, I think it is, or whatever it is, to a child, right?
Okay.
So that goes explicitly against what the definition of those terms are.
Am I supposed to ignore like the extreme amount of irony that this is coming? I'm not trying to make this ad hominem, but aren't you literally a stepfather? Like, are you not an actual father to your children, or?
I'm not the biological father of my stepchild.
But no, when your son or
which
children,
is why we have the term step.
But that's not okay. And I could be totally wrong, and you could lie to me maybe to win an argument. But when your child, if you've got a stepchild, does he come up to you and he say, "Hey, stepfather Sargon" or "Stepfather Carl"? Do they actually call you that? Your kids call you that? Hey, stepdad.
Well, my biological son calls me dad.
Okay.
And my non-biological stepdaughter calls me Carl.
How old? 9.
Okay.
So
why is this hard? But this then
why is this hard to believe?
But this is why trans women will never actually be women. They'll always...
This is what Carl. I mean, he's going to bring this up because I'm going to wrap this up. But basically, if we took Carl's logic and applied it to the family, then stepfathers aren't real fathers, according to Carl, and the category of parent should necessarily exclude stepfathers because a parent should only refer to the biological donor of the gametes or whatever of the person that there is being spoken of. If we took his, women and female and trans and all that and apply that same logic to the word parent with this, really narrow definition, a parent is basically the same thing as being, the donor, the sperm donor for men. Therefore, stepfather isn't a parent. Half father, stepfather isn't a parent, is not a real parent. It just doesn't make any sense.
Always be trans women.
Well, we first of all, we're very far from establishing that. But you think that it's no, we have not established. I promise.
Oh, okay.
We've not established.
Sorry,
that.
yeah.
So
carry on.
So you're saying that step parents could never be real parents in terms of like how we define like father and mother, could never be real parents to children.
It depends how you define parent, but they can't be the real father or mother.
Yes! Okay, just like it depends on how you define woman. And you can define woman inclusively. Alright, so this we're going to stop here. Mostly because, one, I only thought it was going to go for an hour, and I've gone for 2. So you guys got spoiled. Then the other thing that I definitely want to do before the end of the hour, I'm going to drag this over here. Actually, I can pull that off. So if you want to, you can finish watching that. Maybe Kevin and I will pick it up from minute 30 and at a happy hour do some dunking on this. But a couple things that I wanted to, let me just look at the list. Can I see the list, please?
What philosophy deals with are the...
Alright. Is there a way I can see the playlists of all of Brian McGee? No, maybe not. What
philosophy deals with
are... there's a couple really good Brian McGee interviews. I think Cyril is one. Yeah, with an E. So I would recommend 2 videos definitely to get a better understanding of why Carl is so off base. One being the philosophy of language with John, I think it's Cyril. I don't think like in the German you pronounce the Cyrilla or Surly. And then there's also another one he did that's pretty good. Cyril on Wittgenstein. There are a few other, I think, linguistic ones. I think also Chomsky is also, I think, interviewed once by him. But these ones by Cyril in particular, the philosophy of language is really, really quite a good video to watch. So I will, how about this? I'll go ahead, I'll put the link in the chat for you guys. And that way if I forget to put it in the description box below, at least it will always be on the video. Hey guys, we have had, I hope you guys have been having a fun time dunking on Carl with me. This has been a rather unusual stream. Normally I kind of had more things prepared and I do more interaction with the chat. Today I mostly just watched a few comments go by without interacting with it too much. So Cyril is very famous. Yes, he is. Let me just do a quick check. I'm going to just do, before I leave, people have actually been giving super chats, and I wanted to make sure before I headed out that if anyone else made one that I missed, I want to make sure to acknowledge them, because they're not necessary, but if I'm also not going to lie and say I don't appreciate the hell out of them, because I definitely do appreciate the hell out of them. So Katie, thank you again for your contribution. HK is always really good. It's been very supportive and very generous. I'm not encouraging you to do it more, I'm just acknowledging that you've done it in the past and you're awesome. So just to let you know, I wanted to check that. Yeah, otherwise it'll be normal time next Sunday. We'll have another 2 hour plus live stream. I will always, of course, be possibly doing something with Kevin in the future on a happy hour. We always organize those on at least a day or 2 ahead of time. There's no such thing as a set schedule with us. But if we do, you can learn more about our content. Actually, dang it, why don't I quickly here just show the Facebook group so you know what to search for. If you are interested in catching happy hours and knowing when we're going to actually do them, you can come to our Facebook group. Let me find it and then I'll bring it up. And it's an open group. Anyone can join. Trolls, though, will be driven away pretty quickly because there's a lot of cool people on there who don't take any crap. But yeah, this is it. So you can look for Kristi and Kevin's Happy Hour and the Happy Endings on Facebook. You can join that group and then you will be able to get notifications when we schedule a show. We also post it there, so you don't have to rely only on Twitter. You would be able to get notifications within an hour to 3 hours of when we decide to do an episode. Until the next happy hour or the next Sunday live stream, guys, thank you for watching. I do appreciate your time and attention, your support, your comments, your cheeky bits in the chat are always a lot of fun. So I have been Kristi. You've been awesome. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see each other again really soon. Okay, bye-bye.